All right, well, looks like it's 6 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for taking time to join tonight and learn about harmful algal blooms. This webinar is being recorded and it will be available to view later. If you register, you'll automatically get an email with the recording. We'll also post it to our Water Quality Extension YouTube channel. So if you want to reference back to different things, or if you can't make this training and then you can watch it later, that works too. So my name is Braithwaite and I'm an assistant professor for watershed quality at Utah State University. And I have the pleasure of coordinating our statewide water quality monitoring program, Utah Water Watch, as well as the HAB squad. And I'll tell you a little bit more about those things later. But first, I want to introduce Hannah Bonner. She is a recreational water quality program coordinator for the Utah Division of Water Quality. And she started in this position just a couple months ago, I think, and she has been fantastic. And so it's going to be great to work with her on harmful algal bloom monitoring. And she's also a very good presenter. I got to see her first presentation yesterday, so you are in for a treat with her tonight. A few logistics before we dive into that though. Throughout this webinar, please feel free to ask questions. We have the Q&A function, so any questions you want to ask Hannah or me, just please put that in the chat, or not in the chat, in the Q&A. If there's any questions about tech issues, or if you want to put any comments for other participants to see, you can use the chat for that. So any questions that you want answered, please put that in the Q&A. We'll start with an introduction to harmful algal blooms from Hannah. Then I'll provide some information about how you can get involved if you're interested in helping monitor for these blooms. And then we'll wrap up with that question and answer. So we'll make sure at the end, if there's any questions throughout these presentations, that we have plenty of time to answer your questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Hannah.
Awesome. Thank you, Hope. Let me just share my screen. All right. Well, it's so exciting to be with you tonight, and I'm really happy to talk about harmful algal blooms. This is one of my favorite topics. And like Hope said, I'm going to give a brief overview about what harmful algal blooms are, what they look like, but then I'm more than happy to delve into any specifics if you have more technical or detailed questions after this. So to begin with, just talking about harmful algal blooms, or HABs is the acronym I'll be using tonight. I really wanted with this presentation to highlight the four main questions that I hear about HABs a lot, that maybe you have asked about HABs or that people will ask you about HABs. And those are, first, what even is a harmful algal bloom? Second, why should we care about harmful algal blooms? Third, what can we do about harmful algal blooms? And fourth, how can we safely recreate and enjoy the incredible water bodies in Utah with this knowledge about harmful algal blooms? So these are going to be the questions I focus on tonight. And my hope is that by the end of this presentation, you can answer all four of these with confidence. So to start with, let's just get this out of the way. We call them harmful algal blooms, but that is such a misnomer. Actually, algae has nothing to do with it. It's cyanobacteria that create these harmful blooms. And so we call them algal blooms, actually cyanobacteria. So you'll hear me interchangeably using cyanobacteria, HAB, harmful algal bloom, but it all refers to cyanobacteria. And cyanobacteria is a really, really interesting thing. It is a photosynthesizing bacteria, and it's been on Earth for a long time. We actually have found fossils of cyanobacteria that date back to about 3.5 billion years ago. So one of the very first forms of life. And in general, cyanobacteria has been pretty incredible and wonderful for the Earth. It does a lot to enhance soil fertility. We can use it for biofuels. It's a great user of greenhouse gases. And actually about 2 million years ago, cyanobacteria was responsible for oxygenating the Earth's entire atmosphere, which allowed humans and other animals to be able to live here. So in a lot of ways, we owe cyanobacteria for great things. So just wanted to give that positive cyanobacteria push before we talk about less pleasant cyanobacteria. And also cyanobacteria is everywhere. It naturally occurs in every single water body in the world. So harmful algal blooms are not invasive. Cyanobacteria is already there. The problem, however, is when there's too much cyanobacteria there. This image that was my starting image was actually taken at American Fork Marina on Utah Lake. So this is the lake water, and you can tell it's a very unnatural color, very murky, and that's because it's currently experiencing a harmful algal bloom, which means that there are millions upon millions of these cyanobacteria cells in each section of this water. And bloom events are really what are problematic, which is when we go from a few cyanobacteria cells to millions and trillions of cyanobacteria cells in a water body, and that's what introduces a lot of problems. There's three main issues that arise when you have a harmful algal bloom event. The first is pretty severe disruption of the water body's ecosystem. The second is effects and threats to human and animal health. And then the third is mostly related to those first two, economic impacts. So I'm going to briefly touch on those just so we can have that context of what exactly is going on and what the problem is with HABs. So to start with, the effect of these blooms on ecosystems. When you have a typical amount of cyanobacteria, the food chain is intact, but when these species are able to start rapidly multiplying, they start introducing murkiness to the water with all that chlorophyll, which actually blocks out light and prevents light from reaching submerged plants, which are a big part of the food web. And then as the bloom continues to develop, you actually then get quite a bit of change to water quality. You get changes in pH, and then when the bloom is first forming, you get a lot of oxygen, but then as you have all these cells dying and decomposing, that uses up oxygen, which depletes oxygen in the water body and leads to those dramatic fish kills and other events like that. And so really when you have a bloom occur, you change the entire food web, you're taking out aquatic plants, you're changing phytoplankton, so microscopic plants in the water body, changing water quality. And so a bloom can be really disruptive to an ecosystem. Likewise, there's some big human and animal health implications from harmful algal blooms. I've just pasted a few headlines from the last few years on this slide, and you probably have seen things like this. We get afraid about drinking water. You hear about how these blooms can poison or hurt dogs or other pets. And then, of course, we had that notorious bloom on Utah Lake back in 2016 when we had over 100 people calling in and reporting symptoms. And so they're scary for that reason. And the problem and why we have this big threat to animal and human health is because in addition to producing all these cyanobacteria cells, because the cyanobacteria really want to dominate the water body, many species will also produce toxins, which we call cyanotoxins, as part of their life cycle. And these toxins not only crowd out the competition to benefit the cyanobacteria, but they also can have those health implications for animals or humans who are exposed to the water. On this slide, I've listed two of the toxins we commonly see in Utah waters, just to give you a little bit of background. Microcystin is the toxin we most frequently encounter being produced by Utah cyanobacteria species, and it's hepatotoxin, so it actually targets the liver. And so it can result in effects from vomiting to headaches to sore throats to pneumonia. And again, most common toxin we see. Then anatoxin is another toxin that has potential to be produced by many Utah cyanobacteria species. And this is the scary one. It's a neurotoxin, so it targets the neurologic system. So it can result in things like tingling, numbness, drowsiness. And anatoxin is also known as very fast death factor because at high enough doses, it can be lethal almost instantaneously. And so this is why we call them harmful algal blooms, because there is the potential to produce these really, really dangerous toxins. Exposure to these toxins generally in really dangerous doses happens through ingestion. If you just get water with these toxins on your skin, generally you won't experience symptoms more than rash or irritation. But where we start to worry about humans and pets and animals is if you're getting the water inside your body. So if you're doing recreation like water skiing or tubing or swimming, that inevitably is going to result in some ingestion of water, or pets, are not as discriminating. Your dog's going to be lapping up water or snapping at things. Children as well constantly have their hands in their mouth, and those are all possible routes for exposure to cyanotoxins. And then, of course, stemming from these two concerns, both the food web and ecosystem threats, and also health threats, there also are economic impacts from harmful algal blooms. Certainly recreation and tourism takes a hit when these events occur. Fisheries can be affected by these die-off events. And then it is expensive to make sure that monitoring is happening and that water is being treated adequately so that there isn't any problem in our drinking water supplies. So there are definitely problems associated with harmful algal blooms. And one of the questions then that comes along with that is this normal? We know cyanobacteria is native to these water bodies, but are these bloom events just nature running its course, or are they becoming more frequent and severe? This image again is of Utah Lake during that 2016 event, really dramatic. You can see those little boats down in the corner. And when we're asking this question, is it normal? We can look back in history a little bit. The U.S. National Office for HABs has put together this really fascinating timeline of our oldest known record of HAB events. So if you go to their website, you can see all their points. I just pulled a few that I thought were fascinating. Actually, our oldest known event of HABs dates back to about 47 million years ago, to a site in Germany where we have all these amazing fossils of primitive horses and bats and other mammals, and also fossilized cyanobacteria. And so the working hypothesis is that all these animals were poisoned by cyanotoxins and then got fossilized. So we know they were happening way back then. The earliest potential written record is actually in the Bible, so about 1000 BC. And if you're familiar with the story of Moses and the children of Israel getting out of Egypt, there's an account in there of the water being turned to blood. And the symptoms described there also align really well with a harmful algal bloom, which can be red, fish kill, nasty odor. So some people see that as another evidence of a harmful algal bloom way back when. And then, of course, when European explorers were first checking out the Americas, they do have written reports as well that seem to align with harmful algal blooms. The one I highlighted here was when Captain Vancouver was exploring British Columbia all the way back in 1793, and one of his crew members got sick from a neurotoxin found concentrated in a shellfish. So yes, like these blooms have been happening as a natural part of the Earth's history. There is precedence for them. However, it does seem that they are increasing in severity and frequency. I just pulled this figure here from a paper that came out last year from Anderson et al., where they were looking at some marine harmful algal blooms across the world. And they found that from even just 1990 to present day, there was statistically significant increases in the number of harmful algal blooms occurring of all types. And so this is becoming an increasing issue of concern throughout America and throughout the American West. So why is this? Why are we seeing more blooms, and why is their severity increasing? There's two main answers for this. The first is because of eutrophication, which is basically the enhancement of water bodies with nutrients. Phosphorus, and in some cases nitrogen, are two nutrients that act as limits for these bloom events. And so when nutrients are added to a water body, there then is the availability for the cyanobacteria to start to multiply and develop into a bloom. And this nutrient input can occur through a number of human-caused venues. Fertilizers are a really common one. If there's agriculture areas or even lots of nice lawns right next to a water body, that fertilizer can run off and introduce those nutrients. Human and animal waste can also be a big part of that. Our sewage treatment has come a long way in the last few decades, but it wasn't that long ago that raw sewage is being dumped in water bodies, which is a huge nutrient input. Erosion can also do that. This can be human caused through things like construction and development, or this can just be a natural process. And then, of course, storm runoff. We have all these impervious surfaces in our towns and urban areas. And so when it rains, you get water running over these, picking up nutrients and ultimately flowing into local water bodies. So all these things introduce nutrients, which really prime a water body to develop a HAB, which it may not have been able to support otherwise. The other thing is that this process is exacerbated by climate change. Warmer temperatures do also favor the development of harmful algal blooms. So that's all a little depressing, but the good news is there are things we can do to help, and there are ways that we can address these harmful algal blooms. So I'm going to talk specifically tonight about 2 ways that you can help. And the first is by reducing your personal nutrient inputs. A lot of the nutrient inputs to these water bodies are non-point source. And by that, I mean it's lots of different sources and individuals, which makes it really hard to regulate in a law or a state sort of way, and rather makes individual efforts so impactful. And so I've just made a list on this slide of things that you may be able to do in your own home, in your own neighborhood to reduce nutrient inputs. And so as I read and talk through these, I would encourage you to think about which of these may apply to you and which ones you could look to implement to help prevent HABs at your local water body. The first is easy: clean up animal waste. If you have a dog, take it out for a walk, make sure to pick up and dispose of that poop properly. The second is supporting practices to reduce runoff. Like I mentioned, our cities and towns have a lot of these impermeable surfaces. And so when it rains, that water runs right over them, picks up lots of nutrients and hits the water body without ever being filtered or cleaned. And so by supporting practices to reduce runoff, that's a way to address that. Making more permeable surfaces, so areas of vegetation where water can seep into groundwater. That process of passing through the soil actually acts as a natural filter, which helps remove those nutrients before it reaches water bodies. As well, you can create things like storm barrels, again, to intercept that runoff. Going along with that, creating buffer zones around water bodies has also been shown to have significant impacts on nutrient input. So even a few feet of trees or native plants between a developed area and a water body once again acts as that natural filter by intercepting runoff and processing it, cleaning it, removing those nutrients before it's introduced to the water body. And so even if though you don't live right next to a water body and you can't create a buffer zone, you can also be aware of nutrients coming from your yard or your house. Storm drains is a big way that you can help with that. Cleaning things like leaves or other organic material from your storm drains, that can introduce nutrients. So making sure to pull those out and dispose of them properly assist with that. As well, cleaning up your grass clippings, leaves, etc., reduces that nutrient input. And then finally, when it comes to your lawn or gardening or plants, making choices to use phosphorus-free fertilizers is a great contribution. Or also just making sure you're only using the recommended or the minimum amount of fertilizer so there's not excess to run off into water bodies. So that's just a list of ideas. And my homework assignment for you tonight is, again, to think about these, to think if there's these or other ideas that you can do to reduce your nutrient input, maybe share with neighbors and friends so that we can start reducing those non-point sources of nutrients and reducing the potential and the driving mechanism of these harmful algal bloom events. The other thing you can do to help is what you're doing right now, which is coming and learning about harmful algal blooms. As people become informed about these, then we can know how to think about them and address them. And it's not this amorphous, scary thing, but rather it's a problem that we can logically and rationally address and also still be able to enjoy water without being so worried about. And so tonight we're going to hit on a few of these points. I'm going to give you a quick crash course in HAB identification, so you do know what to look for when you're out recreating, and then also share with you some Utah statewide resources and how you can report a possible harmful algal bloom. This will also prep you for what Hope is going to talk about, which is the HAB squad, and some additional ways you can really get involved with this program. So to begin with, we're just going to do the HAB identification 101. To some of you, this might be brand new. Some of you might be pros at this already. So we'll be using the cyanobacteria photo quiz to keep you engaged during this. And how this will work is I'm going to show you pictures of things that may or may not be cyanobacteria. And I would love for you just to put your vote in the chat as I show you each of these pictures so we can see what the consensus is, and then I'll tell you how you did. So our first photo quiz is this lovely picture right here. So take a look at it and put in the chat, yes, if you think this is cyanobacteria, or no, if you think this is not cyanobacteria. Oh, okay. So we have majority of you are saying no. I'm not going to tell you the right answer yet. I'm actually going to show you another picture first. So here's another one. This, you get two views. There's the more like broad scale view of the whole water body and then a close up under the water. And so again, same question. Is this or is this not cyanobacteria? Yes in the chat if you think it is. No in the chat if you think it's not. Okay, so we're getting, oh wow, we're like unanimous no's on this one. Okay, wonderful. Thank you for your feedback. So you guys are so good. You all are already pros. So we're right on. Neither one of these was cyanobacteria. This is actually the most notorious cyanobacteria lookalike, which is filamentous green algae. And you guys are clearly like proteges at cyanobacteria identification, but most people see this and they always think it's cyanobacteria because it's kind of green and nasty looking and it's in the water. And so it's a common mistake to make, but they are different. You know, as we've talked about, harmful algal blooms are not algae. While both do photosynthesize and both do have the potential to bloom with nutrient input, cyanobacteria are prokaryotic, so much more ancient, don't have a nucleus or organelles. And most important, they can produce cyanotoxins, while filamentous green algae in general, cannot produce cyanotoxins. Consequently, cyanobacteria is the thing we really worry about. And luckily, there also is an easy way to tell these two apart using something called the stick test. And so filamentous green algae is called filamentous because it has these hair-like filaments in it. And so the way to do a stick test is when you see something that may be filamentous green algae, get a stick or a rock or something you don't mind getting gross and that is long enough that you can do this test without touching the water, and actually dip it into the nastiest part of whatever you're seeing, pull it up. And if it is filamentous green algae, you're going to see something like in the image to the right. So these hair-like strands, it's going to be attached. It's going to pull up all together. It'll be like pretty resistant. And that's your indication that it is filamentous green algae. And so you don't need to worry about cyanotoxins. You are not seeing a HAB. If instead, though, the stick comes up without anything attached to it, or it looks like it's been dipped in a can of paint, those then are indications that what you're seeing might be cyanobacteria and a HAB, and you should proceed with caution. So there you go. You will not be tricked anymore by filamentous green algae. So yeah, let's do another photo quiz. You know how this works now. So again, we have two pictures, same thing, but you have a close-up picture on the right and the more broader scale picture on the left. My question for you is it cyanobacteria? Yes or no? Would love to see your answer in the chat. Okay, Brandon and Christina, immediate no's, no. Wow, okay, yeah, you guys are so good. You're totally right. Also not cyanobacteria, nicely done. This is another cyanobacteria lookalike called duckweed, and also other aquatic plants are sometimes confused for cyanobacteria. And just going back, I think when you can see those little leaves, you know, that is obviously not cyanobacteria, but especially when you're just looking at a water body from a distance, it can be easy to mistake these two. However, they're not the same thing. While both, once again, photosynthesize and have the potential to bloom rapidly if there's that nutrient input, duckweed is a plant. Fun fact, it's actually the smallest flowering plant in the entire world. And duckweed and aquatic plants do not produce cyanotoxins. So again, not what we worry about as much. Harmful algal blooms do have that potential. And so you want to be able to differentiate these two. And once again, kind of similar to the stick test, there's an easy strategy for doing this. If you see something and you're not sure if it's a cyanobacteria bloom or an aquatic plant like duckweed, you can once again use your stick or your rock. Don't use your finger until you're sure to pull a little bit of it out and take a look at it. And if you're either seeing roots, like you can see in the right image, or leaves, then you know it's not cyanobacteria, but it's either duckweed or an aquatic plant. And once again, you don't have to worry about those cyanotoxins. So fabulous. Okay. Oh, this also, I came across this when I was looking up duckweed photos, and this is so interesting. I don't know if this is true or not, but this article claimed that duckweed is this new health superfood. So if any of you have actually tried duckweed in a smoothie or something, I would love to hear about your experience, because who knew? But yeah, don't eat cyanobacteria. Duckweed, probably okay to eat, apparently. Okay, next photo quiz. Is it cyanobacteria? We're actually about to go on a photo quiz marathon. I'm going to show you 5 images. Again, just throw in the chat, it's pretty quick, if you think it is or is not. Okay, number 1, is it cyanobacteria? Yes or no? Okay, Joe starting off strong with a yes. Okay, wow, we're getting lots of yeses. Okay, I'm not going to tell you any answers yet. How about this one? Is it cyanobacteria? Yes or no? Brandon is a yes and no, uncertain. Okay, okay. We're not flowing cyanobacteria on this one. How about this? Is it cyanobacteria? Yes or no? Okay, got some. Okay, once again, not flowing cyanobacteria. It looks like most people for this one. Great, thank you for your participation. Okay, final 2. Is this cyanobacteria? Yes or no? Okay, yeah, that was too obvious. Lots of yeses on this one. And then last but not least, this one. Is it cyanobacteria? Yes or no? Yeah, it's tricky. Laura's like, what? Okay, fabulous. Great responses. All right, this is going to blow your minds. All 5 of these images were, in fact, cyanobacteria harmful algal blooms. It's true. I'm going to flip through this one more time so you can see them. Yes, cyanobacteria. Yes, cyanobacteria. Yes, cyanobacteria. Yes, cyanobacteria. And even this really weird one, this brown stuff is benthic cyanobacteria found in Zion National Park. So these are all examples of harmful algal blooms. And this is where it gets challenging, because it's not like there's just one way that these blooms can look. Cyanobacteria species are wildly different in appearances in every way possible. Their colors can be anything from green to red to pink to purple to blue to turquoise. Their texture, they might be like that first one, almost like a pea soup. They can have the texture of spilled paint. They can accumulate in surface scums. They can grow on the bottom of a water body in those weird mats. They can be globules. They can be just residues you're seeing on the beach, or they can even be like this one, where it looks like someone just dumped their bag of grass clippings into the water body. Likewise, where you find these varies quite a bit. They sometimes will just float on the surface. Other times you won't even necessarily see it in the water, but rather you'll just see a residue on the beach. They can be pretty evenly distributed through the water column, or like in that case of Zion, you can only see them benthically, so just growing on plants or rocks on the bottom of the water body. And even the type of water body, you can find them in reservoirs, ponds, rivers. Nowhere is safe from cyanobacteria. The other thing is their smell. Cyanobacteria sometimes can also have very distinct scents. Sometimes, not always, but you'll get a smell of rotting, gasoline, sewage, or even fish. So lots of different manifestations of cyanobacteria. And so how do you ever know if what you're seeing is cyanobacteria? My recommendation is the process of elimination. If you see something that looks weird, if its color is weird, if there's like texture, if it's not clearly filamentous green algae or duckweed, then the best bet is to assume what you're seeing is cyanobacteria and that there is potential for cyanotoxins. And that's because a lot of things are cyanobacteria. And this I found is the easiest way to make that judgment call, to eliminate these two common other things that grow in water bodies. And if it's not either one of them, then it's safe to assume that it's a HAB. So there you are. You are now cyanobacteria identification experts, which is awesome because the goal of this is to be able to get out and to recreate. And so now you know what to look for so you can check before you immerse yourself in the water. And that really is one of the goals of our program here at Division of Water Quality, is encouraging people to just take a few minutes before they recreate to check this out. We're calling this initiative our Take Time Before Playtime initiative. And in addition to now what you can do, being able to look for signs of a harmful algal bloom, we also have resources available that you can know everything we know about our monitoring efforts. So if you're not familiar with it, we have a great website, habs.utah.gov, which is a one-stop shop for all of our updates about cyanobacteria harmful algal bloom monitoring. On this website, you can go to any water body throughout the state, and if we're aware of a HAB or other water quality issue, we're going to post about it. So for example, if you were interested in hiking the Narrows in Zion National Park, and now you know there's this crazy cyanobacteria growing there, and so you wanted to see if there was a concern, you could go to habs.utah.gov, find the Virgin River, click on it, and see that currently the Narrows is under a health watch, which is the lowest level of warning, so that these toxigenic cyanobacteria species may be present, but no toxins have been detected. So maybe you'll make the choice that you're still okay to hike it, but you're going to be really cautious not to get any water in your mouth. Or let's say instead that you really wanted to go boating on Deer Creek and you were curious, hey, like, should I be worried about a planktonic cyanobacteria bloom, like that green pea soup we're seeing in the corner? Once again, you could go to habs.utah.gov, find Deer Creek, go to the site-specific page, and you'd see that things look pretty good. There's not currently any health advisories, and we haven't had any reports, nor has our monitoring team seen anything that would indicate a HAB. So then, just like you check the weather or the water depth before you recreate, you've done the prep work before you drive all the way to a water body, so you're not going to have any unpleasant surprises when you arrive. And then, of course, you can combine that with your new knowledge about HAB identification. And when you get to the water body, take 5 minutes to look around and ask yourself, do you see any weird colors? Does anything smell strange? Or do you see anything weird floating in the water, on the surface of the water, washed up on the beach, or growing on the bottom of the water body? If the answer to this is all no, then you don't have to worry about HABs and you can have a great time recreating and you're prepared and you've done your research. Or if you do see something that's concerning, then you also are empowered to be able to share that with other recreators and to make an informed decision. And we'd also encourage you to share that with us. We do rely, because there are so many water bodies in the state, on reports of recreators to cue us in so that we can get a monitoring team out there as soon as possible. And so we have this 24-hour reporting hotline. That's what that number is. And so if at any point you see something that looks like it might be a harmful algal bloom that we don't have recorded on our website, please give this number a call and we'll make sure we investigate it. So a plug for that. And there you go. Now you know all about harmful algal blooms. Just to recap, we've learned that it's not actually about algae, but it's about cyanobacteria, and that these blooms can disrupt ecosystems, threaten human and animal health, and hurt economies, and that these blooms are being increased due to nutrient input, but that there's things we can do to help reduce that. And as well, you're now empowered to recreate safely by knowing how to check for HABs, both using our website and doing your own personal check whenever you visit a water body. And of course, you also know how to share with us anything you find. So I'm really excited to turn you loose on the world with this new knowledge, or maybe this refreshed knowledge. And you did do really good at the HAB identification quizzes. So I have a lot of confidence in you. But that's the information I wanted to share with you tonight. I'm going to turn over to Hope to talk a little bit more about something else you can do. And then, like I said, I'd be delighted to answer any questions or go more in depth on any of these points.
Yes, thank you so much, Hannah. And yeah, fantastic job on the quiz, everyone. I know we have some current HAB squad volunteers that are on, so well done. And even if you're not, or if you're interested, that's awesome. Thank you so much for participating. I realized that I also didn't introduce Becca. So Becca is also here. She's part of our team with Utah State Water Quality Extension, does a lot of great work with our Utah Water Watch program and other programs. So yes, so third person is it's our amazing Becca too. That was perfect, Hannah. I'm gonna share my screen, and I have a few things that are a little similar, so it might be a little bit of a review, but I want to share with you about how to get involved with our harmful algal bloom, our HAB squad. All right, and again, please feel free to put any questions in the Q&A. Hannah knows so much about HABs, and so if you have any questions, more technical questions, there's not too simple or too complex of a question. Feel free to put anything that you have in that Q&A, and we'll make sure to address all of those at the end of these presentations. And if you have anything else you want to throw in the chat for comments, that's also great too. So our HAB squad is a wonderful part of our program that we've recently started in 2021. There has been other harmful algal bloom monitoring before that, but we've kind of transitioned into a different state. And so I'm going to give you a little information about that, as well as our Utah Water Watch program. So Utah Water Watch was started in 2012. It's our volunteer water quality monitoring program. Some of you are very familiar with it and are taking part in it. If you're interested, it's a monthly monitoring for water quality. We have a training, and then our volunteers generally monitor April through October once a month at a site or multiple sites that are close to where they live and where they recreate or have a special interest in that water body. We do have a couple of upcoming trainings. For those that are listening to the recording, this is not going to be helpful, but for those of you right now, hopefully this is helpful. We are having an online training tomorrow too. So sorry for that little glitch, you guys. We'll get back going. I'm glad to see that, yeah, it looks like everyone's back on. So sorry about that. Let me share that screen again. So yes, for our HAB monitoring program, we have the Utah HAB squad. And so this is a chance for you to go out and look for these harmful algal blooms. We've also learned it's really cyanobacteria that we're looking for. And monitoring at a site weekly or every other week, these blooms can really start and stop very quickly. So if you're able to get out there weekly or every other week, that's really, really helpful for us. And for the training part of this, just attending this webinar or viewing it later, you will have the training. This is the training essentially for that. And you can go out and be a Utah HAB volunteer, part of our Utah HAB squad. I'm gonna actually just stop my video because I feel like the sliding is extra weird. So once you've done that, I'm gonna share the process to become a Utah HAB squad volunteer. But first I want to tell you a little bit about what it involves to see if you're actually interested in participating in this program. So like Hannah was saying, we want to take HAB seriously if there is a harmful algal bloom. So we do have some safety precautions if you're out at a waterway. If you want to monitor for harmful algal blooms, you don't need to actually touch the water. You don't need to take a sample at this point. You can just do a visual check to see for harmful algal blooms. They can be dangerous to human health, like Hannah also was telling us. The cyanobacteria can produce toxins, and they can attack our liver, our nervous system. They can be irritants on our skin. And so really, and a lot of it too is not wanting to swallow any of that or ingest any of the water and those toxins. So avoiding steep banks or getting into the water if it looks something like this, and staying out of that water. So here's a few simple safety guidelines, obviously not ingesting water. And then you can also, we've all become pretty accustomed to wearing masks during COVID. So if you are concerned about a toxic bloom, you can wear a mask when you go out to monitor if you're concerned that there is a harmful algal bloom. And then washing hands thoroughly. So if you have been in an area or you just realize that, hey, that looks a little bit suspicious, making sure you do wash your hands before eating or drinking. So how to monitor for HABs, you get a little sneak peek with these icons over here on the right. We have very simple instructions for you so you can identify HABs in the field. A lot of that is what Hannah actually went over with looking and seeing if it's filamentous algae, if it's duckweed. I thought that was super interesting with people eating or drinking duckweed. I know that wildlife really loves duckweed. There's a reason it's called duckweed, and it's a great food source for a lot of animals. So I guess that makes sense for humans to want to eat that and get nutrients there too. So it's very interesting. So we have those simple instructions. It's just a few pages with lots of pictures. And then you will go out to a site or multiple sites weekly or every other week and make those observations at your site. And the monitoring season for harmful algal blooms is usually during that recreation season, so June through October. And then when you visit your site, you'll record the presence or absence of a potential harmful algal bloom. And we have a data sheet that you can use that data sheet. We use citsci.org, it's a citizen science database, and they actually came out recently with a app too, so you can use a physical data sheet if you want to record that data sheet in the field using pen or pencil and paper, or you can use that app. You can use it where you don't have service, enter that information, and then when you do end up having service, you can upload that data at that time. So you'll upload that data to citsci, and then Hannah did a great job with identification, but it just as a little review, you can do the stick test like we were talking about. So if it sticks to the stick, you know that it's green algae, it's not an issue. It has those really filamentous, stringy, hair-like structures, and so that's not going to be an issue. If there isn't a stick around or you can't find a good rock or stick, you can just kind of look for those long, stringy things and think, okay, I'm not as concerned because it looks like it will stick to a stick. For harmful algal blooms with cyanobacteria, like Hannah was saying with those photos and images that she showed, some of the common ones that you can easily identify, and some of them are trickier, especially the benthic ones in rivers, but if you see things that look like grass clippings, like someone mowed their lawn and just threw in that grass into the water, that's kind of our bottom left photo. And this one always makes me cringe because it's a bare hand in that water, so don't do that, but you can get a really good sense of what that looks like in the scale too of someone's hand there. It's much better if you're monitoring that way to be using a glove like in the top photo. The other one is a dispersed pea soup look, so that's our top right photo, and then that spilled paint look that Hannah was talking about too, which it can look very disturbing, but also pretty in a way, I guess. These are kind of cool organisms that they're able to, look like this spilled paint that's turquoise or blue or purple or just all kinds of really vibrant colors. But that's also probably a good sign to all of us of, hey, we don't want to get into water that has that really bright spilled paint look. And it really will look very sheen and kind of like it is just a very thin layer of that paint floating on the surface. So if you do suspect a harmful algal bloom, the first thing is to call that hotline that Hannah mentioned earlier. It's here, it's on our slides. If you just Google it, you'll see it, and it's also in the instructions for our HAB squad. And then you'll want to contact us, Utah Water Watch, by phone or email to alert us to the potential HAB. We'll make sure that we're collaborating with you and the Utah Division of Water Quality to make sure that gets reported, and we can figure out the next best step. And then you'll want to upload that data to citsci, the citizen science database, using the cyanobacteria data sheet as soon as you can. And then if you can return to that water body Daily after that is kind of our highest bar. That would be amazing if every day you could go check on it after that. If not, that's totally fine, but as frequently as you can, get out to monitor. That would be very, very helpful to all of us. And then the Division of Water Quality, if we look at those photos that you take and they say, yes, this does look like a bloom, they will be out to monitor within 7 days. And then always, like Hannah was mentioning, check that Utah Division of Water Quality HAB website for updates on the most current conditions. And same if you're going to recreate at a water body, it's always good to check and make time before playtime. Check the weather, check that you have everything you need, all your materials, and check on the conditions in case there is a health watch or some type of advisory before you go and recreate. And I also really want to stress that not finding a harmful algal bloom is really important. We do have this data sheet set up so that you can report, yes, I think there is a harmful algal bloom, or no, I'm not seeing any signs. It really helps us to know kind of when and where we're seeing these blooms pop up. So even if you don't see a harmful algal bloom, don't think, oh, well, I don't need to report anything, or I don't need to submit that data because there isn't a harmful algal bloom. It's much better to know that you didn't see any signs, and that's very useful data. So I just want to give you a quick case study of how this process has worked in the past. This is just one example. There's a lot of great examples, but we had a volunteer who sent pictures and said, hey, I'm really concerned. This looks like the grass clippings that we saw in the training. So we think that there might be a harmful algal bloom on the Jordan River. And so with this volunteer and the Utah Division of Water Quality, we were all in communication, and the very next day, the Salt Lake County Health Department and the Utah County Health Department issued a health watch based off of those photos, and then there was monitoring that happened 6 days after that too. So it was very helpful. They weren't actually going to monitor that water body anytime soon, and so it's really helpful to have extra pairs of eyes on the ground looking for these harmful algal blooms. So it's wonderful that the Division of Water Quality can monitor in all of these different places. But as we all know, Utah is a very big state. We have a lot of water bodies, a lot of places to monitor. So more eyes on the ground is super helpful. So if this sounds like something that you're interested in doing, if it seems reasonable to you, all you really need is your eyes, a camera, so you can check and see if something looks like a harmful algal bloom or not. Then you can join our HAB squad. It's easy as 1, 2, 3. There might be a few minor steps in between these, but the main things are you'll fill out our Google form, and I think Becca will put that in the chat. And then once you fill out that Google form, we'll be in contact with you. We'll send you those instructions, all of that good information, a liability form to sign. And then you can actually get out and monitor. And we have a monitoring website that I'll show you, and a map so you can check and see if there's a location near you that you can that you're interested in monitoring. So with that, we can turn over to our question and answer. I just put our contact information up here. I'll leave that up for just a second, but I know Hannah and I are happy to take any questions you might have. Please feel free to put that in the Q&A and we can address those questions.
And can I just add, I love so much what you said, Hope. There are so many water bodies in the state of Utah, and we have a very small team and limited resources to be able to visit them all. And so even our priority sites, we can only get to once a month. And, you know, there's multiple ways we can detect a HAB. And the ideal way is that we see these visual indicators right as it's developing. And so we can get out those warnings like that great case study. And so I'm so grateful for those of you here who have already been involved with this. And if you're looking for a meaningful opportunity to get engaged, this is it, because this on-the-ground data is so helpful in prioritizing our resources, whether you're seeing something or not. And I think it really does have a huge impact on the health of hundreds potentially of recreators who might be visiting these water bodies. So thank you again for your interest in getting involved with this.
Yes, thank you so much. It's been amazing. I feel like we have so many different people and organizations that all work together to really make all this happen. I mean, it was with that case study, it was one volunteer and then contacting Utah Water Watch and the Division of Water Quality, all of us working together, and then working with the local health department to put up that health watch, yeah, it was the health watch. And then that was all within a day. It was the next day that that sign went up. So it's really amazing what we can do and the implications that it has for all of our recreators, especially in times when it's right before a holiday. I mean, that's so hard for the Division of Water Quality to monitor all of these different places, and you can't monitor every single place right before the 4th of July or Memorial Day. And so having extra pairs of eyes is super helpful. So thanks to those of you that have done that. And if you're interested, we would love to have you get involved. It looks like we have a question that I see in the chat. So Tony asks, when you discover a HAB, is there any way to reduce the hazard with science, or do the HABs just disappear? Oh, that's such a complicated one. Hannah, do you want to take that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tony. Once a HAB is going, our options are limited. There are a variety of treatment options that will potentially, like algicides that could remove the cyanobacteria, but that's fraught with complications, either due to the scale of the water body or other environmental impacts from those treatments. So it really depends on the water body and on the location. Generally, our practice is, once we discover a HAB, to let it run its course, and rather focus our efforts on communicating the situation, putting up warning signs, and encouraging recreators to avoid that area until things are resolved. And then most of our emphasis is on long-term treatment, because even, these chemical treatments might remove the HAB for a few days or a few weeks, but long-term solutions all relate back to reducing nutrient inputs. And so DEQ has been involved with programs right now looking at improving infrastructure, stormwater catchments, etc., because that's what ultimately prevents HABs from happening.
That was great with a very complicated, yeah, a complicated question. That was a great question. Thank you, Tony. I'm not seeing any others in the Q&A. If you want to throw those in the Q&A, that would be great. Or at this point, feel free to use the chat. I'm just putting in those links again for the trainings for Utah Water Watch, and then the HAB Squad volunteer registration form, if you're interested in any of those. But yeah, we have this amazing expert here, Hannah. Hannah, do you want to tell us a little bit about how you got into this position, how you got involved in harmful algal blooms? I think that'd be really interesting to hear your background with it.
Oh, sure. So I did my graduate school study actually mostly focused on hydrology. So a lot of modeling and predictive and communication elements to that, which led to me working at Zion National Park last year, actually primarily with a focus on their benthic algal blooms. So that's a really new and developing area. And so I was there as a guest researcher investigating that, which is how I then got connected with DWQ and then moved into this position.
That's awesome. Thank you. I would love to learn more about benthic blooms, because I used to tell people, rivers, you don't really need to worry, like just really focus on lakes and reservoirs with harmful algal blooms. So could you give us a little more information about these benthic blooms, how common they are, what to look out for with those?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the hard thing about benthic blooms, and I didn't go super into depth with this in my presentation, is they break even a lot of the rules we have associated with our more typical planktonic blooms, or the blooms you see in lakes and reservoirs. And I think someone even had a comment in the chat about that, how would you stick test? It was Brandon, stick testing a benthic bloom. And so, I mean, the blooms we're used to that happen in standing water generally, they're generally pretty distributed throughout the water column. It's these floating particles, these floating cells, and microcystin is their main production, and they are really tied to those nutrient inputs. Benthics, though, are very different. So as I mentioned, they're adhered to the subsurface, so usually attached to rocks or plants, and that's where they stay for most of their life cycle until they're either disturbed, say by someone walking on them or extra high flow, or they gain enough air bubbles from their photosynthesis that they actually become so buoyant they detach, and then they float down the river where they'll go and make new colonies. And so their life cycle is a little bit different. And the other weird thing is not only are they now in flowing water, so rivers and streams, but there actually is not that same clear connection between nutrient input and benthic blooms. Zion National Park is a great example of that. They have pretty great water quality, and these benthic blooms are still thriving. And so we think that our working hypothesis is the big issue there is that, you know, Zion typically has these monsoonal events where they get really heavy rain and these flash floods that scour out their riverbeds. But with climate change, they'd missed the monsoon season and they hadn't had any major flash floods for a few years, which is really what allowed them to almost go into a bloom state because nothing was removing them and why they spread so widely. And so that, yeah, still something we're totally trying to understand. And we still have not had a chance to do a systematic survey of other rivers in Utah. And so that's something we're going to be looking at more this coming year is where else we might see them. Because based on where we're seeing them in other countries and states, it is possible they could also be in our more mountainous rivers or even locations closer to the valley. So I'm sure we'll all be hearing more about benthic blooms in the coming years.
Yeah, thank you. That's super, super interesting because yeah, I always think of blooms with, oh, increased temperature and increased nutrients. And that's where, but yeah, in mountainous places or like with the Virgin River, that's really interesting and good to know. So I do see a couple more questions that have come in through the Q&A. So thank you for submitting those. Mary has a question, do the HABs and algae grow mostly near the shore or out on the lake?
That's a great question. Again, it depends on the water body, and the interesting thing about in the lake setting is they can move around because they're floating in the water column. And so HABs actually, you know, they may start in one location, but then based on currents, on wind, they'll move around, which again is why it's helpful to have many eyes on them because that's why it almost seems sometimes like they appear overnight, is a bloom may start in the middle of a lake, but then there's prevailing winds to the east, and then they all stack up on the east shore. So they, depending on the water body and the temperature and the species, they might have a preferred area of original growth, but then they have the potential to migrate around the water body throughout the bloom's life cycle.
Great, thank you. And then Tony asked, how many HABs are reported per year in Utah?
Great question. Tony, I was just looking at these values for a presentation I gave yesterday, and it's such a testament to people continuing to be engaged and learning more. We've had a steady rise in citizen reports since 2016 when we began this program, and I can't remember the exact number, but I think last year we had 43 reports into that phone number that ended up being corresponded to a confirmed HAB. So there's a good number of reports we're getting from the public that are generally spot on.
That's great. Thank you so much. Well, we're at the top of the hour, so thank you so much for participating in our webinar, and huge thank you to Hannah for providing that amazing overview and HAB 101 with identification and the misnomer. I love your slide with the name tag for cyanobacteria, and also remembering the positive things about cyanobacteria. It's actually done a lot of great things for us too. So make sure to check out the Take Time Before Playtime initiative. And if you're interested in joining the HAB squad, we would love to have your help. So thanks so much, everyone.
Yeah, this was so fun. Thank you for all your great questions and participation.
Thank you. Have a great night.